Hey, Josh.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? Okay, I started a little bit early because I thought maybe we might have a little bit of a technological issue, but it looks like it went pretty smoothly.
There you go.
Okay, good. So we'll wait another minute or so. We had about 28 people sign up, so we have a couple people in the room already. So that's pretty interesting. So this is a pretty neat way of doing some stuff here. It's almost like radio. It's almost like radio, but not. But you can
There you
record
go.
this. It's going to be recorded. And like I said, thanks for your time. I said we'll wait 2 minutes and then we'll get started with the questions.
It, it it's almost like our conversations we have on a daily basis.
Almost, almost, yeah. So hopefully they'll be a little more educational though for them.
Yeah.
So very good. So we're off and running. So a number of people already entered the room.
Yep. For those who don't know, Joe and I talk on a daily basis about everything that's going down in the case. So it's just like you're with us on the telephone.
Exactly. Except for we'll leave out all the curse words and stuff, I guess.
Exactly. Insulting everybody.
Exactly. Jeez. All right, so it's good. So we're going to get started. It's almost 4 o'clock. Josh, thanks for coming on. And for those of you that don't know who Josh is, he is the writer, director, and producer of The Killing Season, which can still be seen on A&E. Correct, Josh? It's still running.
Yeah. Yep. A&E, Hulu, Amazon Prime. They're re-showing it everywhere at this point.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. So the Long Island serial killer, unfortunately, has brought out all the old shows and stuff. But you were like one of the first, if not the first one to do the TV episode. You did 8 episodes on all kinds of cases, but you really focus in on Long Island serial killer cases. Is that right?
Yeah, there was actually one Amy project that had been done before us, but our goal really it was like, why isn't this case being solved? It's so huge. There's so many bodies. You're so close to New York City. You would think the police department would be on top of their game, and so that was a real impetus. Why did this case? Why wasn't it getting solved?
I agree.
So
Sorry
our
about that,
introduction
guys.
to Twitter Spaces has turned into a bit of a disaster. Anyway, so so we were talking. I said, yeah, it's taken a long time for this thing to finally get off. But tell me what your first impressions were about the press conference today.
Uh, Look, I think we've known that they've known about Karen Vergata for about 6 months now. They've been doing a whole bunch of work um, ever since the task force was formed. They had information. This was going back to when we got all that new information about Peaches.
Right.
That's when they learned who Karen Vergata was. And everybody kind of thankfully didn't release that information. Um, so we've known, and then the question is, are we going to get more information about Peaches? I think we'll find out about Peaches in 2 weeks. I think they've ID'd Peaches and they've ID'd Baby Doe, Peaches' daughter. And, I think the next big question is, when are we going to find out who the identity is of Asian male?
Right. Yeah. Peaches. Now we know that the FBI was asking for help in the Peaches case in Alabama a few months ago. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
they put out that, so we knew that they were on to that one. But this one
Yeah.
was unexpected. Right. I thought it was going to be the fourth piece of the Gilgo Four. To be honest with you, that's what my thought was at first, and I heard it. I even tweeted about that. It's about.
Oh,
I was a little
yeah.
disappointed.
Well, I had heard from Fox News, from a guy at Fox News, that they were going to release Karen's name, and then there's a web sleuther out there, a guy named Murder Inc., who's really smart, and he found a way to kind of, I don't know. Let's just say that he figured out a way to track what some of the police are doing, and so he figured out who who Jane Fire Island Jane Doe was, being Karen Vergata. So thankfully, he didn't make it public, and he let law enforcement do what it needed to do. And law enforcement has been doing a great job. I mean, it's just unbelievable the amount of information that comes out. But then you turn around and ask yourself, why has this taken so long? And that's just what's so frustrating.
Right, and I actually, someone, if you were a part of that, somebody tweeted at me, if you recall, like, what took so long, and well, the best answer I can give is it just shows you what happens when you have a motivated law enforcement agency with good leadership. What can actually happen?
Yeah. And I don't know if everybody listening here has read that Washington Post article. If they haven't, you have to read this Washington Post article. Came out August 1st. Gilgo Beach killer hunt slowed by infighting between prosecutors and police. And that was also written by Gus Garcia Roberts, who wrote the book Jimmy the King, which is about Burke.
Right.
So, Gus has been on top of this from the get go. And look, everybody, we all know it's so easy to play Monday morning quarterback with a huge case like this. Yet at the same time, there is no doubt that what Spoda and Burke did is problematic. We don't know how far it goes. I think I the other day I called Joe and I said, Joe, did you see, Tim Sini actively said that they actively obstructed justice in this case. I mean, for Tim Sini, former DA, to say that Spoda and Burke actively obstructed justice is, in my eyes, a huge thing. And I think that's going to lead to some ramifications down the line.
No, absolutely. And if Tim Sini's also the guy that said that he didn't know who was in charge of the case at the end either. So
Look, Joe, as you know, this case was plagued from the start. In this article, it mentions what we covered so long ago in 2011, Spoda and Dormer, the former police chief, having a public spat between each other about whether there's one serial killer or two.
right.
So, this case has been plagued by politics from the get go. And again, I just so everybody knows, I'm so pro law enforcement, but remind that we need to remind everybody that in Suffolk County there is three political parties. There is the Republicans, there's the Democrats, and then there's the police. The police have their own super PAC. Why? They're one of the second highest paid police departments in the United States. So there's a vested interest in controlling the police department. So I don't know exactly what that means in terms of affecting this case. Again, we're talking pro law enforcement, but we're also talking about politics, and especially in this case.
Yeah, politics unfortunately ruined the start of this investigation, including what we thought maybe a long time ago, where unfortunately, the lack of information or lack of investigation started the pure speculation on who was involved and what was involved, including a couple of lawyers out there. So yeah, so well, here we are. Right? Here we have an arrest now for Rex Heuermann, and responsible maybe for at least three. I think they'll tie the fourth one relatively soon. I think they're just waiting for the DNA
Agreed.
test to come back. I mean, we all
Agreed.
we all could have agreed at the very beginning that the Gilgo Four were all killed by the same person, right? I mean, that's the
Yes.
consensus I think we all can agree with.
Yes.
The question now comes down to the other victims. Now, as you know as well as I do, that they're going to be a lot harder to put together in this case.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up, which I think you and I discussed post appearing on Nancy Grace, and I thought that this was really smart. This almost kind of broke it open for me. It's something, in fact, that you said, which was the if we're dealing with the same killer, and one reason why we may be dealing with the same killer, the obvious question is, why is there two different MOs, right? And one answer could be, Joe, what you said the other day, which was the first set of murders were all sex workers, but they were probably all streetwalkers, and these are individuals who got in his car, and as a result, he took forensic countermeasures to shield himself by dismembering bodies, etc. Versus the Gilgo Beach Four, if you look at the time period, it's far later, and at that point, sex work had changed; it had all gone online. So for a guy who's 59 years old, or 50 at the time, he might have thought that he was getting away with it. So as a result, he didn't have to go in and dismember victims. He didn't have to do all this forensic countermeasures to protect himself. And that's why we're dealing with two different MOs. It has to do with sex work moving online.
Exactly, right. So that's the thing I've been floating since the very beginning. That and unfortunately, that fight that you talked about between Dormer and Spoder, I think, puts a damper on tying anybody to all those cases eventually, because as well as I do, a defense attorney is going to bring that up front and foremost in the case and saying that this is basically a cabal of information coming against my client and all the other stuff that you're going to hear. But it's very plausible, and I think listen, I said that from the beginning, and I'm going to stick to it.
You should, because once when I heard you say it, it totally changed something for me. But actually, I have a question for you, Joe. Like, I'm worried that the defense attorney, even in Rex's case, yes, I know they have DNA, but he can't he say that all this infighting and all this questions about one serial killer or two, the whole thing with Burke and Spoda, can't he say that all of this has prejudiced the case or ruined the case, and all of this is a problem?
Oh, absolutely. And what I'm also concerned about is that the district attorney has been doing the circuit now. He's been going around and doing a lot of interviews. I mean, he spent an hour with Newsday doing an interview. I think these things all come back and haunt him, so to speak, in regards to when the time comes to pick a jury, about how,
Yeah,
poisoning the jury pool and everything else that goes along with it. So I
yeah.
am concerned about that. And I wish, I understand he wants to take a victory lap, whatever, but the victory hasn't really happened yet.
I will say that part of the reason that we did the killing season, it wasn't just the fact that they hadn't solved the case, but it was the fact that they weren't saying anything to the public, and that allowed for everybody to go online, web sleuths, the comments in Newsday, and start this crazy conspiracy theories about everything. So I love the fact that they are finally talking and being forthright and being and communicating, but I guess that is a double-edged sword.
Well, it is. I mean, listen, compared to what we used to have, this is like an unbelievable amount of, you know, talk about information overload, right? So, no, I listen. I'm
Yeah,
happy that there is some transparency, and I'm really happy the way the new leadership is going. I just like to see them scale it back, right? There's no need to do an hour interview and that kind of thing. I mean, after the case is over, and if you win, I'm like, yeah, tell us all about it. At that point, I could
yeah.
spend 2 or 3 hours.
Now, there was something that the previous person asked a question about Karen Vergata, and she mentioned Rex's marriage. I think she said that it was like a year after his second marriage.
Right.
I have to say, like, if we, I keep shouting this from the rooftops. Look at Rex's marriages. Look at his relationships. We know that he went out for the GB4 based upon when his wife was away. So we know that the whole, whether it's because he finally had the house to himself or what have you, I think a lot of his behavior is based upon his relationships. And we all know that serial murders, for whatever reason, stressors happen and then they react from stressors. So when this first broke and we were all going in and looking at his first marriage, his second marriage, there is, I forget the name of the woman, who was found on Meadowbrook Parkway. She was petite, Carmen Vargas. She was petite. She was found bound. She was found on Meadowbrook Parkway. She was found like a mile from where Rex was living and about to get married to his first wife. So I think the marriage thing, if you really want to kind of get into it, that is going to be a huge key in terms of tracking his whereabouts and tracking who he killed and why.
It's a great point. All right, so there's so many different working parts in this. So yes, I mean they have to figure out what that triggering moment is in his life and what he was going through. Like you said, we know that happens with lots of individuals who do this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of interesting and see how this thing has developed. I mean, like we said earlier, we've been talking about this case for years, even before killing season, and the information that we've gotten in the last couple of weeks has trumped everything that we saw in the last 11 or 12 years. So,
Absolutely,
and,
absolutely.
and I think we're just learning about Rex now. I think they're really going to get involved in a lot of different things in his background. And I know everybody's interested right now. All of a sudden, we want to tie Atlantic City. We want to tie this. We want to tie. My God, let's just focus in on one thing at a time here.
Look, Atlantic City. There's no connection to
I
Atlantic
don't believe
City.
so either. Yeah.
And even I was the one who did the documentary, and I know there's no connection. The point of the documentary was like everybody on West Sleuth was saying, you got to look at these four girls, and then you got to look at these four girls, and then these four girls. The point was that we all want to prescribe all these murderers, right, to one super duper serial killer who's traveling the country, and the real horror is that it's not true. That there's just hundreds of dudes out there who, commit this violence against women, against sex workers on a daily basis. So the point of the documentary was to kind of like to push that up in some ways, but then to like spread the larger message that this is happening all over the country. I mean, geez, look at Albuquerque.
Right.
It's just horrific what happened in Albuquerque.
Right.
So it's not connected, by the way, for those who are wondering, like, well, why isn't it connected? I mean, those four women were taken literally out of the Golden Key Motel. They were all exited out of the back of the Golden Key Motel. It was one hotel. It was a crazy drug hotel. Here we're talking about Rex, who's like a stalker, and it's very much a different thing. I was watching. I was going back to the Killing season, and there's an interview with Melissa Cann, and Melissa Cann even said it. She's like, "I believe that Maureen was stalked." And I couldn't believe she like nailed it right from the beginning. I think all these women, except for maybe Amberlynn Costello, were stalked. Amberlynn Costello, I originally thought she was stalked, but then I think maybe Joe, it was you or somebody else turned me on to the idea that when he got wrapped up in the ruse, he got so pissed off that he decided, to act out,
Right.
and that's why he came back the next day.
And he was also able to convince, I believe it was two of the girls, to leave their cell phone home the night that they disappeared too.
Yeah, well, he paid him a lot of money to do so.
Right.
You
So
know,
I mean,
and yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Josh.
Well, no, I was just wondering. I was wondering, like, first he had the two cell phones of the original two girls, and then he wanted to leave those girls home. So at some point, he must have realized, okay, they're pinging. They can figure out what I'm doing by pinging. But he was so, one of we're talking about Amanda, the girl Amanda who was called, and why would he risk calling her? And speaking to Amanda's parents, one of the things that they told me so often was that um, um, uh, is it Megan? Not Megan. I'm sorry. I'm just
Melissa
blanking on her
Bartholomew.
name. Melissa. Melissa had a mouth on her. That's what her family said all the time. They're like, oh my god. They're like, I can't even imagine what she must have said to him to push him to be so angry that he goes and then calls Amanda. So I thought that was very interesting as well.
Yeah, no, definitely something triggered this guy and during all those things. But one question I always had about these phone calls, right, when they were tracing him into Manhattan, did they record any of those phone calls? I mean, it's
No,
yeah, they didn't, and
they did not. They did
I
not. They did
can't
not.
understand for the life of me why that wasn't. I mean, they had this thing going and they didn't do it. I don't understand.
Well, so yeah, and that came up too in the show. Basically, one thing is the Maine Police Department, right? Or Buffalo, like those guys were kind of on it, and so they had set up for Amanda to record the phone call, but it for whatever reason they couldn't get the proper information. I don't think they could get the proper authority with which to record the phone calls, but they were trying, and they were trying to do it, under the radar, by the way.
Right.
But it ended up not happening.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, talk about a lost opportunity there too, in that whole aspect of it. But I mean, when you think about how everything came together basically in a year and a half, and I think they actually had some of this information probably within the first few weeks, and
Yeah.
they just needed to exploit it, and you just have to kind of shake your head and say, why, right? Why?
So for many of you who probably don't know on the phone call, I haven't made this public, but Dave Schaller told us the same thing about the avalanche. We have in our footage. We went back and he told us, he said, I didn't see what happened the night that Amber disappeared. And then later on down in the interview, he follows it up. He's like, but there was this one dude who was stalking her. He's huge. And he said, I just reviewed some of the information yesterday. 6'9", 300 pounds. He's a monster. And he drove a green avalanche. So we had the information too. Now, so we missed it. Now you might say, well, it's not your job. You're not the police, but still, at this point we thought we were getting pretty close. So we missed it because we didn't think that the stalker was related to the guy who took her, because the guy who took her would be covering his tracks so much rather than the stalker who they had met, who they had run the ruse on, who had been in the house. Like if you're trying not to get caught and you're doing all this stuff, telling people leave their burner phones at home, what have you, blah, blah, blah. Why would you show yourself, or like, why would you go back to that victim, even though both of the guys in the house had seen who you were? And that would be one reason, because he was so pissed that they ran the scam that he decided to throw caution to the wind and snatch her and make her suffer.
Exactly. I mean, geez. So yeah, I mean, so here, if this is Dave Schaller, you said,
Yeah, this was Dave Schaller. He told us this information.
right? And if he told you that information, there's more than likely he told Suffolk County this information too, or something very similar to it. So
He definitely told Suffolk County, without a doubt. Reading that Washington Post article and seeing that it was more than just like, oh fuck, we missed the important clue. Like there's something more going on there. Meaning, like it doesn't matter if that information might have not been investigated, because we don't know that it even would have went further outside of the police department. We don't know if Burke would have squashed it. We don't know if Spoda would have squashed it for whatever reason.
yeah, I guess there's just so many characters at the beginning of this case, right? And how many people got the fingers pointed at him, but we have phone records now, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out during this investigation.
I wonder whether or not Suffolk County is going to air all its dirty laundry. I don't think so, because that dirty laundry goes pretty high. But, I think Ray Tierney is so squeaky clean in a great way that he's just going to kind of do what he's doing and kind of get this case solved so that we can finally close the door.
I agree, and it's also not his political party, which I think kind of was
Yeah.
a little bit of a an obstacle back then too, right?
That
So,
is, that is unless some intrepid filmmakers or documentarians decide to go back and really try and expose what may have gone on in Long Island.
oh boy, yeah, that would be interesting, right? For sure. I
Yeah.
mean, talk about it. There's definitely another 8 seasons there, maybe 80 by the time you're done with that. So, this before we wrap this up, tell everybody where they can see the Killing Season again if they haven't seen it or they want to see it again.
Yeah. Of course, you can see it on Amazon Prime. You can see it on Hulu, and I think you could see it on A&E TV. And Joe, I feel like we barely got even started, so we should do another one.
Well, let's do it. I mean, we had a lot of people show up. I was shocked for the first one, and even though we had a couple of little glitches in the beginning, it actually worked out pretty well.
Yeah. Let's do another one, and hopefully we'll have some more new information. Because I think I mean, geez, we haven't even gotten into Shannon. My
Well,
God.
yeah, and think about it. Without Shannon, we have nothing, right? How many
Yeah,
times have we said that?
absolutely. I mean, it's such a shame, a tragedy, but my God, what an important sacrifice that she has made. It doesn't matter if she was murdered or not in some respects, just meaning the sacrifice and what she gave to this case and how she stopped a serial killer, basically.
Exactly. All right, Josh, I know we're out of time. You're busy. You got to run to something else. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time coming out. I mean, listen, it was fun, right? It went by quick.
Oh my
So
God, it went by so quick.
all right, everybody. So we're going to do this again. We just want to thank Josh again. So remember, if you haven't seen The Killing Season, go on to A&E and Amazon Prime and watch it, and then we'll talk about it again.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody, for listening. Thanks, Josh, for coming.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Take care.